Hi everyone, my name is Maciej Roleder and I'm co-founder of C-Shark, an IT company working closely with Regtech industry leaders, banks and financial institutions. I come from a technology background with over 15 years of experience in IT and almost 10 in fintech and Regtech. Today I wanted to talk to you about what could be slowing down the Regtech industry growth and how can we adopt innovative technology faster and with less hassle. What do we need to change in the way we approach things in order to make this easier? But before I jump into that, let's take a quick look at where we currently are in terms of maturity and adoption of new technology. From where I see it, RegTech is still growing at a quick pace. The technology is enabling that. But for big players, such as global banks and complex financial institutions, we can observe that adopting new technology is still slow on the uptake. We have to remember that those organizations are really big machines with their own momentum and inertia and simply are not able to change course that quickly. Of course, this is a generalization. We can see how some of the big banks, I personally can see that in APAC, have started fundamental transformation programs. But the change is still relatively slow. We are starting to understand the data we have been gathering since late 90s, and we're not happy. The data quality and significance is in question. It feels like we almost have too much data now, but not enough data that we can actually use. We have been talking about that abundance of data 2 to 3 years ago, when we very optimistically look at what all that captured data can do for us to streamline our processes, recognize patterns, and reduce overall cost of operations across the board. But right now, it seems that we have too much data, too much information. And for humans to be able to comprehend that amount of information and to make it useful is impossible without the use and help of machines. And machine learning can help with that. Humans can process very little of that without that help. So the only way for us to access that information is if we can ensure that we have a quick way to filter the significant data over the noise. As expected, regulatory scope has been expanding both in the number of regulations and in the level of detail needed to be captured. We can see some attempts of standardization, but with the increased demand for more online and real-time services, that of course will also need to be regulated, the scope is still growing. The demand for digitalization has been on a steady rise as well. But with the boost in 2020, last year, when we all empirically felt the need for having access to online services in all aspects of our lives, banking, stock market, services such as buying groceries or consulting your doctor or even trainer. It is an expectation that has just been born last year. We have been introducing those, of course, over the last years in the past, but it was always an option. In last year has shown us that those businesses that can't perform services online will struggle to stay competitive and eventually be left behind. So ultimately, in my opinion, we are still producing innovative technology, or actually to be more precise, we are finding innovative ways to utilize technology faster that we can mass adopt it. In some cases, we had to wait till the legislation and policies catch up to allow for the adoption of new technologies. Cloud services and being able to store sensitive data on machine not owned physically by the banks is a very complex topic. In cases of blockchain and distributed ledgers, we had to wait till we can fully appreciate what benefits that technology can truly provide. And one of the biggest aspects being protection against the unwanted and unauthorized changes. What could possibly be slowing down the advancements on Regtech? There's nothing wrong in prioritizing short-term gains, as long as we don't forget about the bigger picture. Nearsightedness might give us quick returns. It can also cause tunnel vision if we're not careful. We just simply can't afford to only change small things all the time. We'll eventually run out of them, those quick wins, and reach glass ceiling if we are not planning them on a long-term progression path. Internal misalignment is it's a recipe for a disaster. So different opinions are healthy and challenge us to create better solutions and clarify our visions. But once a direction is agreed, everyone needs to be on board and paddling in the same direction. My personal experience with big organizations is that sometimes the delivery objectives of technology leaders and the business are not aligning. They do at a high level, but there is a lot of churn and compromises made during the delivery itself. We can definitely do better there. All animals, including humans, are averse to change by nature. Adopting something that is new and unknown requires effort and results in becoming conservative. We need to remember that affecting a real change is not just about systems, solutions, and new processes. It is foremostly about people. If people are not comfortable with what we are proposing, with the change we're proposing, or a new solution we're going to implement, then it means that the solution is incomplete. Communication of change and need for innovative technology. As I mentioned, I'm coming from a technology background, and this topic is very dear to my heart. I actually found myself being guilty of that in the past, that sometimes we are just so convinced that this new technology and this new thing will solve all of our problems and future-proof the organizations that we actually forget to properly explain to others using plain language and constructs that are universal, as opposed to being lost in the complex language and low-level details, what benefits it will actually give. I have actually seen great ideas and innovative technology being rejected on the go simply because it was not understood. Decision-making process in big organizations can take months, especially when we don't have a clear analog that either another player of the same size adopted that technology, or it's a completely new technology and we're not comfortable with some of those aspects. This is one example that organizations need to actually change the way they operate at a governance and administrative level to be able to reap benefits of newly emerging solutions. The procurement process needs to be adjusted to look for new things as well. The next one is quite simple. Cost of new technology. Almost every piece of new technology will be expensive if it's not mass produced or mass adopted. If you think about payment terminals or IoT devices, they were extremely expensive in the old days, in 2000s, right? And actually lowering the cost of technology by producing it in bulk allowed for the IoT revolution. So right now, you can actually turn on your light bulbs, your lights, by a flick of a finger on your phone and change the color of it even, right? And if you look into your kitchen, you have smart gadgets there that will cook our meals to perfection and send us a text message when the meals are ready. So, as almost with anything, timing is crucial. We have seen how new technologies failed to catch a wave because the timing was just not right. VR, augmented reality glasses, 3D television, sometimes whatever you do will just not work if you miss the right moment in time. The same applies to any sector of industry, and early blockchain introduction was actually too early in my opinion. Everyone started to use it as a buzzword, and even before we could really find practical applications for it. This in turn can create hype, and hype is very similar to stock market bubble, when it is actually very difficult to find objective value of the technology and benefits it can bring. What can we do to help accelerate adoption of innovative technology in Regtech? Some of those will not purely be from a technology perspective, because I believe it is a broader topic that needs to be addressed. We need to stop looking at being compliant as an ultimate goal. The real objective is to achieve and sustain compliance. That's a subtle change, but it changes the way we structure our organizations. It needs to become part of the values that people want to follow, ingrained in their company DNA. So the way to look at this is in the same way as we would look at infinite games. And this will actually inadvertently help us driving the adoption of new technology. It will bring people on board and also help to plan resource allocation for a marathon and not a sprint. This next one is a no-brainer for me. If you're not open to new technologies, maybe because you have been burned in the past or because of your nature, you will never advocate for it. So in order to bring everyone on board and ensure they will actually support change and adoption of that, what is new, we need to first understand people's motives, what is driving them. We need to understand that if someone got burned with that technology, we need to show them what has changed since then. And only then, when we can align our ideas with their experiences and their motives, we can ensure that the adoption will be successful. This next one is actually quite difficult because it's personal. Being able to properly address the issues within the organization and affect a real change, and not just superficial, it cannot be achieved without acknowledging mistakes and pain points within the current processes and ways of working. It has to be coming from within us. Adjusting the design to look at capabilities rather than systems, anchoring solutions in business processes, and looking at information architecture as opposed to just data is the necessary step to effectively adopt new technology. Some of those sound really simple, but unfortunately, in reality, we are seeing examples when sometimes a need to integrate two systems become a requirement on its own, where it actually is just one way to solve a problem. As a solution architect, I always try to extract a real problem statement, even when I'm given solutions. A very good way to test a new technology or approach is when we're not fully convinced that that's the right tool or it's too expensive to go directly into global adoption. It's good to do an MVP, which is the minimum viable product. So think small, fail small. And that's something that might not be very popular to say to visionaries, but it definitely works at the delivery and planning level. But having mentioned MVP, we need to balance it with our ability to preserve an obscured view of how good should look like and track progress on our transformation path, keeping our core values in the back of our heads. The big picture is something that we need to constantly go back to. Otherwise, the risk is we will get distracted with the smallest of steps of the journey. Transformation is not cheap, so let's try and make sure that we got it right and stay on the course. What areas and technologies we will see more in near future? What I'm expecting to see more of in future is use of machine learning and AI to help classify and filter through the noise of all of the data that we have been gathering. This essentially means we will not just try to extract information and patterns as we started doing it with big data analytics, but also rank the information in terms of its importance and filter out the rubbish. A lot of that we are already seeing in AML screening systems, but in most of those cases, the heavy lifting is still done by human beings. And actually, we are not very well equipped to handle that much information effectively. So ultimately, the quality and significance of data is something that makes or breaks processes built on top of it. We are already seeing that use of cloud infrastructure and cloud-based applications is picking up the pace. The policies are getting more relaxed and compliance is starting to be more comfortable in putting data into machines that are not physically owned by the organizations themselves. This is by no means happening without tremendous effort from cloud providers to legitimize the technology and prove that it is safe and secure. There are still jurisdictional data restriction issues, but we're actually seeing that trend where global banks are coming together to the same table and try to challenge and change some of those policies that can enable more bold cloud adoption. Meanwhile, we can see that big projects already take advantage of templated DevOps processes on low-grade and non-critical environments, reducing the running cost, maintenance cost, deployment time, and actually achieving consistency of outcomes. I believe that over the next few years, assisted decisioning will still be a preference, especially for high-risk mission-critical areas where human interaction would be required to provide final approval and sign-off of the decisions. However, we are already starting to analyze not just the business data, but also the behavior of operators and knowledge workers. And that allows us actually to assist them in the decision-making process. So machine learning can help with that, hinting how similar use cases have been resolved in the past, extrapolating the information on a full scale of the applications within our ecosystem. But if you're fearing massive layoffs, I don't think we trust machines that much yet. And they will help us with the human struggle and allowing operations to focus on the most important and exceptional scenarios. So the human labor will shift and transform, but it will not make jobs disappear. Digitalization is pushing for more online and real-time services. Electronic payments, cryptocurrencies, peer-to-peer transactions that are actually a real challenge for the regulators. And those challenges cannot be solved without automation and help of machines. That drive for an online service also creates new grounds for innovation. With the needs of speed, we need to improve our ways to ID and via our users through use of biometrics and ensure that the person accessing our data is authorized and prevent cases of identity theft and fraud. Finally, we will and are seeing already further expansion of Regtech into industries outside of the indigenous and natural space of fintech and insurtech. Other segments can benefit from similar solutions, especially in medical, civil engineering, government agencies, lawmaking, and more. The incentives are not as big and as painful as in the financial industry, but the long-term benefits can surprise us and eventually outweigh those currently only being applied in fintech. If you are worried, let me assure you, we're not running out of technology that Regtech can use to fuel the growth. The beauty of technology is that it is a tool and it is an instrument. It can be used in many ways, and most of the technology we're today branding as groundbreaking, in fact, was available, at least in principle, 10 to 20 years ago. It is the way we utilize our tools, mass adopt, reduce the running and maintenance cost that made cloud, machine learning, and artificial intelligence work for us. We also can't forget about the data. 2 to 3 years ago, when we talked about that abundance of data, we're simply overwhelmed by it now. The quality and being able to quantify the significance of the data we're starting to capture right now, also that of behaviors that I mentioned, after we learned our lessons, will create new opportunities to make the data work for us as opposed the other way around. Thank you for your time. My name is Maciej Roeder. I'm a co-founder of C-Shark, streaming from Singapore.